Okay, welcome to those who are joining. This is the Inflectra webinar going through the new features in SpiraTeam version 5.2. My name is Adam Sandman, and it's June 8th, 2017. So for today's meeting, this is the plan agenda. We're going to be going through the new features. The first thing we'll be going through will be the changes we've made to the defect tracking module. And although you may not necessarily be using the defect tracking module, it's an important section because the user interface changes we've made are actually a preview for the changes we're making in the next version and version after that for the rest of the application. So if you see something in this new version that you don't like or you find confusing, it is a good time to let us know because we will be rolling out the same changes throughout the application in the next version in requirements management and in test. After that, we'll be going through changes we've made to the program planning board and the project planning board. Then we've made some enhancements to testing. Two specific ones are around the ability to auto-suspect test cases when requirements change, and also the ability to auto-schedule test sets from a build server. And then the last piece will be some changes we've made to the graphing and dashboards. So now we're going to move into the live application. And again, during this section, please stay on mute. There'll be time at the end to ask questions. So this is a version of SpiraTeam version 5.2. And in this new version, when you first come into it, we've made some changes to the dashboards that I'm going to get to. But I'm going to jump straight into the defect tracking module. And the changes we've made affect both the list page and also the details pages, the page for a specific incident. And these changes, as I mentioned, will be made in the next version throughout the application. So first of all, we've added some new inline graphs and charts using our new graphing framework. And these graphs are displayed in the left-hand side instead of the old release filters, which we found weren't being used. And we now show the number of open defects and closed defects, and for the open defects, the distribution by priority. And you can hide or show any of these different graphing segments. And these new donut graphs will also be making an appearance in the next version throughout the application. And in fact, this new graphing engine that's called C3 is going to be used throughout SpiraTeam in the next version as well. So if you like it, please let us know. If you have issues with it, also let us know, because all the graphs in the entire system are going to be redone using this new framework. Okay, that's the main change on this page. We also have changed some of the styling. A piece of feedback we had throughout the application was that the yellow bar at the top in this display number of defects or requirements or test cases was distracting. So we've made a more muted color in white, and it only hovers when you go gray. Now, when you actually go into a specific incident, that's where you'll see most of the profound changes in this version. There's some user interface changes, and there's also some performance changes, which I'm going to talk about. So first of all, for the user interface changes, we've decided to group all of the key information in this new gray bar at the top. So previously, the incident type, which is right here, was down in the fields, and the status was in one of the fields. The workflow used to be over on the left-hand side, out the way, and the progress bar was buried at the bottom in the old schedule section, which is now gone. So we've centralized all this information, this key information, in this top bar at the top. The other nice thing with this bar is, as you scroll down, it remains with the application. Along with the toolbar, this progress bar is now visible, so you can be on any particular part of the defect page, and you can change the workflow, change the type, or view the progress. Now, the other thing we've done is move this title bar. Previously, you had a text box to enter in the name of the defect, and you had a title that was visible. We've now consolidated those into a single bar, which is editable. So the heading at the top is now the name and the title. So the other thing to be noticed is that throughout the application, we've changed all the controls so that previously they had these boxes around it. So if you remember the drop-down list, the text boxes, all of those, they had different borders. All of the borders for all the different types, including the title, have all been removed to make the page much easier to read. So previously you'd have lots and lots of boxes to see, and it was very hard to follow the information. So we've made the information more visible and reduced some of the visual clutter on the screen. We've also changed the organization on the page. When we moved SpiraTeam to a responsive web design for working on different size screens, cell phone, tablet, and desktop, we went from a fixed 2-column format to 3 columns. And one of the things that people found was that they couldn't find the fields because they were laid out randomly. So we've now introduced these new grouped sections. So for a defect, all of the releases detected, resolved, and verified, if they're available, will now appear in this section. The owner and detected by users will appear in the people section, along with any user custom fields. All the date and effort fields will now appear in their own section here, which can be collapsed. So that way you don't have to go down to the bottom to that schedule section, and the dates aren't scattered with the other fields. Also, that means when a workflow hides a field, you don't get these gaps, which you previously had, which was very strange to display, and now it flows correctly. When you make the screen bigger and smaller, it still retains the 2-column and 3-column and 1-column format. So that way you get the best of being mobile responsive, but you also get it grouping the fields so they're easy to use. Now, the other change we've made around people, you'll notice this new follower section. That comes from this new subscribe option. So in the old version, you always had the ability to subscribe and unsubscribe. But now you can also add an additional follower. So subscribes my user, and we've also added the ability to display the initials of the user if there's no image. So if you haven't added an avatar for the user, you can still distinguish them, and the instant messenger is still available. But now you can add other users. So I could add someone else as a follower. So I added Ricky to this incident. The reason why you do that is if I then want to change the defect and I want the email to go out to other people, these new people who are following it will now be notified. It will also appear on their dashboard on the My page as well. And this, again, is only in the defect section right now, but it will be throughout the application in the next version. And it also means we'll be adding other social aspects to be able to notify and message and alert other users. This is just the first step. But it does mean you will be able to email people who are not necessarily in a particular role or who are the owner or the assignee. The other changes we've made are also for the rich text boxes. You'll notice the toolbars are no longer visible until you click on them. Again, just reducing clutter on the screen and visual noise. And the last UI change we made on the screen is, as I said, to move the workflow from the top left into this box, so it's always visible. So when you want to add a comment, previously you'd have to go up, change the workflow status, go down, add a comment, and then go up to hit save. Well, now you can do the workflow, you can make the changes all from within the screen. I'll revert my change. So that way, you haven't got to keep scrolling around the application. Now, the other thing we've done is performance changes. And these are less visible, but they're very important. And again, this is also something we'll be rolling out throughout the application. In the old version, if you clicked on a different defect or incident, the whole page would have to reload, which was a performance disadvantage. In this new version, we've now introduced what we call live loading. So if you look, and I click on another item, we don't reload the whole page framework. Just the data changes, the tabs change, but it's much faster. This new Ajax-based loading framework, as I said, will be used throughout the rest of the application. But another key advantage is that when you do that, you still maintain the browser history. So the URL will still change correctly. So you still have unique URLs that are still permanent, and you can still have different browser tabs open. If you control-click, it will open a new tab correctly. But if you click on the same tab, it knows to use the new live loading, which is much faster. And I guess as well as the UI changes, we've also updated the associations panel to use the same associations panel that we previewed on the requirements page. So previously, if you wanted to add a defect to this defect or another requirement, you had to type in the little box, the ID, with that very small screen for selecting it. We've now made it a full search box, so I can choose a defect that I want to look at. I can scroll down, but more importantly, I can now search. If I want to search on something by, say, multiple, and hit search, you can now limit your results by the search. And this feature is great because you may not necessarily know the ID of the defect. You may not know how to find it, but you can search by it based on something you know of it. And the same thing is true for requirements. You can choose it by folder, or you can search. And I'll just clear the search, expand the full tree out like that. And you've got tooltips to see exactly what's going on as well. So that's the new association functionality. And that association panel will also be moving across in the next version to the test cases and test sets and test steps in the same way that we already have it in requirements. So that's an overview of the defect changes and incident tracking changes. The next thing we'll be talking about is the program planning board. So one of the things we introduced in version 5 was the ability to have programs and have a program planning board. So if we go to the program view, this is my program, internal projects. If I click on the planning option, you can now see a planning board for the entire, say, program backlog, and you can view the requirements by priority. You can view them by status, where they are in their life cycle. This is basically the Kanban view, and you can do it for the whole program. And the other thing you can do is you can now look across all your projects and plan them out across the group. So these are all of the requirements planned in a release across all of my projects. I can segment it by project like this, so I can see what's in one project versus another. But sometimes I want to do prioritization. I don't necessarily need to know which project it's in. What I really care about is knowing that all of my top priority requirements are actually in the top. And I might find that, for example, this requirement here is really not as important as this other requirement. So I might want to drag it down into the low section. And I can do that across 3 or 4 different projects. And so if I have to find my 4 or 5 most important requirements, I don't have to go through 4 or 5 different project screens and project views. I can now see it across the entire program. Similarly, if I want to see the status, I can see the progress of my requirements across the entire program. You know, what plan, what's in progress, what's developed, what's tested, where's my work blockage, where is my choke point? Are we getting a problem where all of the items are being stuck in developed? And is that the problem? Do we need to move everything you just tested? So it helps you see the flow of your requirements through all the projects and see where the blockages are, and then prioritize where you can devote resources to get things moving and have an even distribution. You can also then look at the person view to see the allocation of work across the entire program by person. So you can see if certain users are overloaded or people have got space. And those enhancements were done at the program level. We've also improved them at the project level as well. If you go to the project planning board, under planning board, we've also added the same new views. So if you choose the all releases view, you can view things by release, which was this we already had before. So these are the items by release, but you can now see across all of the releases by priority or by status. So that way you can see the flow of activity across the entire project. So for project managers and program managers, these new features make it much easier to see the tracking of items and where the work is being stuck, where the bottlenecks are. So we've talked a lot about defect management, incident management, and planning. So the next enhancements are fair and square into the testing sections of the application. So if we go into the testing, you can see right here, we've got the test cases. And the main enhancement we made in the test cases is this new suspect flag. And this is a nice new feature. In the past, one of the things people would do is they had a test case. So for example, let's find one that's actually approved. So let's look into our functional tests. And let's look at our ability to create new book. So this is a test case that's already been approved. Let me just mark it as not suspect. So what will happen is, this is a test case that's ready for testing. It's linked to these 3 requirements. Now, if any of these requirements was to change, and let me open up, you would want to know that, because perhaps that change to the requirement means the test does not truly cover it anymore. It needs to be reviewed. In the old version of SpiraTest or SpiraTeam, you would have to run a report in the report center to find all of the requirements that have changed and run the requirements detail report and then look for all of the test cases. What you couldn't do is very quickly search directly in the test case module in the application and find all of my impacted test cases. That's no longer the case. So for example, this test case is marked as ready for test and is not suspect. If I go into any of the linked requirements and make a change, let's go and change the description a little bit. Maybe change the priority and hit save. When I change the requirement and save it, go back to the test case and hit refresh, it's now going to show suspect yes, and the audit trail will show the change too. So that way, as a user coming in, if I want to find all my suspect test cases that have to be reviewed, I simply go into the test repository, go to the root, clear my filter right now, and I'm going to search by suspect equals yes, and there's all my test cases. And then I can go to my test case that's now suspect. I can review it. Maybe add a comment. Reviewed, and it still covers the requirements. Mark as suspect no, hit save. And you could do that then for all the items that meet the current filter. One by one, there's 6 more of them, and then all my test cases will now be marked as not suspect. And the system is intelligent. It only will flag test cases that are already approved or ready for tests. So draft test cases that haven't yet been approved won't get marked as suspect, because that would create noise. So that's the enhancement to the test case module. Now, for the changes to the test sets, that really is useful for customers that are using continuous integration servers, such as Jenkins or TeamCity or Bamboo or TFS. So one of the situations we would have is that, let's say we have a testing cycle. We've got some automated tests that we want to run. So what we could do is, let's say we want this to run every single day after the build is run. Let's say it's a smoke test. So what I could do is I can put in a plan date. We'll make it automated, assign it to our machine, and let's say we want to run it tomorrow. We want to run it every day at, say, 9 o'clock. Hit save. Very good. So that's how we would do it in the old version. Now that works really well if we want to run it independently. But let's say this is really dependent on a build finishing. And so what we really would like is if the build finishes and passes, we always run the test. If the build fails, then we don't want to run the test, because obviously it's going to be invalid and it's just going to create false results. The other thing is, we set it to run at 9 o'clock. Well, suppose the build starts at 8 but runs longer than an hour. Well, the test won't be ready yet. So in the old version, you had to basically guess when to run the tests, and you had to hope that it was in sync. The other thing is, let's say you went into your Jenkins or Bamboo server and changed the schedule. Well, you then had to go into SpiraTest or SpiraTeam and then manually adjust the schedule here as well. So we added this new feature called Schedule on Build. You can leave this blank. You can leave this blank here. And you can change it to one time. All you do is mark Schedule on Build and make sure that the release you've chosen is the release that the build's going to be reporting against. What I mean by the build is, if you go to this release, I'll just control click on it. Every build in SpiraTest or SpiraTeam can be linked to a build server, And here you can see some examples of builds that have been reported against this release. So when a new build reports against this release and enters a new build entry here, it's going to automatically schedule this test to run and sets the plan date automatically to be a certain amount of time after the build. By default, it's 5 minutes. So what you could do is you could decide to make it 2 minutes, 120 seconds, or just leave the default, or put a value in of your own, say 10 minutes. That's up to you. But that way you can now have the system automatically run all of these tests against the build that was chosen when the build passes. And you can have as many tests as you want linked to this release. So you could have one release, and you can simply have 5 or 6 test sets with their test cases all linked to it. And as soon as the build passes, SpiraTest or SpiraTeam will schedule all of those test sets against that release, against that build, and then the result of the system will run the test automatically. The results will come back. So that's an overview of the two main testing changes we made. The next piece we talked about in the agenda was the dashboards. So if we go in here to the project homepage, we can talk a little bit about the changes we made to the dashboards. So the first thing we did, we've actually added a couple of new graphs. So this test run progress graph was previously only available on the reporting section. We've redesigned it to use the new graphing framework called C3, which we're using throughout the application in the next version. It has better tooltips and better data visualization. And you'll see that in the next version, we're going to be using that same framework for all these graphs. So we added this new graph. But the other thing we did is we've now provided you with 3 different dashboards. So previously, you only had the dashboard that looked like this one, the general one. And of course, each user could go in here. This is the dashboard. Has some test information, some defect and development information. It has some source code information. It has issues and risks. So a little bit of everything crossing the entire application. And you can filter it by release. But sometimes you would be perhaps a test manager on one project, and you might be the project manager or the product owner on a different project. And in the old version, you'd have to go in here, modify the layout, and add items to it. Now, you can still do that to any of the dashboards, but what we decided was it made sense to have 3 predefined dashboards, because in many cases, users didn't even know what was available in that add button and wouldn't add them. So we now have 3 predefined views, which contain all of the widgets across all the 3. So we've taken all the 20 or so widgets, the 25 widgets we have, and we've now defined a default on each of them, so at least all the widgets are now available by default on one dashboard. You can still take any of the dashboards and customize it, but now you don't have to. So if you're on a development project and you're in charge of the source code commits, you're in charge of the defects, the development team, and the delivery, you can now use the development dashboard as your default. And the system will remember the next time you come back which dashboard you used. And they do have separate URLs to give to someone. So the development dashboard is very similar, but we've now taken off the test information. You've got the source code commits from the source code repository, the defect count, incident count, the requirements graphs, the burn down, the burn up, the tasks, late finishing, late starting, the defect counts, and the defect aging. All of this is now available on this one by default. The testing one now has all the test information. So the test run progress graph is now visible, and then the requirements coverage graph is available, and the requirements summary. But the requirements regression coverage, this lets you see the test coverage of the requirements that were not added in this release, but were simply tested in this release from earlier versions. And this looks the same when you're viewing by all releases, but when you choose to view it by, let's say, release 1.1, it looks quite different. So, and many of our users in the past were looking for ways to show me what has passed and failed across all my requirements. I don't need the ones that were new features in this release. I want to know across all the features that were in previous releases, do they still pass, do they still fail? And so this widget gives you that regression coverage, but many of our users didn't know it existed. So now it's available on by default in the development view. Similarly, on the testing view, sorry. And similarly, the test set status view now shows you the test set status. many of our users want to know, well, I don't know if this test case is passed in all the test sets it's in. It's in 5 different test sets. It needs to be passed in all 5 instances, not just in the one. And that graph is available right here. But again, many of our users didn't know it existed. People wanted to know, do I have any tests that are overdue? Again, that didn't exist. So that's now been added here. So that's some of the main changes we made. Now, one other thing we did do for testers, which is very popular, and we made the change on both the My page and on the project home page, is we made it easy to deal with tests that have been started. So if I go to the My page, we'll show you this one first. Now, previously, if you ran a test case and you were in the middle and you paused it, you, as a user, could always go in and resume it by going to the My Pending Test Run section, and you could click on the orange play button, and that will resume the test from where you left off. You could also decide that this test is irrelevant now. Maybe the test case has changed. I'm going to re-execute it by clicking the cross, and that removes it. But a common feature people wanted was that I want to be able to assign this test run to someone else. I don't want them to start from scratch. I just want them to be able to continue where I left off. So perhaps it's a test case that we knew from the beginning I was going to hand off. Or maybe, more likely, I intended to run this test tomorrow, but I've been called to a meeting. I won't be in to do it, so someone else needs to do it. So I, as a tester, can click on the Reassign button, choose a different tester, hit Assign, and now it disappears from my dashboard and appears on theirs. So they can then very easily hit the Resume button and continue it. In addition to that, there is a situation where, unfortunately, I was ill today and I can't do my testing. But someone else would like to be able to actually take over the testing. The test manager would like to be able to reassign the test case to someone else. In the old version, there was no way of even seeing these test cases. The test managers would often wonder, how many test cases are in progress? Maybe this person left the company. What can I do with it? They were orphaned. But in this new version, we added this new All Pending Test Runs widget. So what you can do is you can now click on the option, if you're a project owner, and just reassign it. And it's similar to what the user had on the My page, but it's not just limited to one user. I, as a test manager, can see all the members of the project, and I can then reassign to someone else. So that way, if someone happens to go away on vacation or I forget, I can automatically reassign to someone else. And it just gives me read-only visibility into all the tests that are underway, which is very useful in of itself. So those were the main changes we made in version 5.2, sorry. And just to recap, the focus in 5.2 was on the visualization of and planning changes, and also redoing the defect tracking section. Some of those changes will be making their way into the rest of the application. The new fast loading for defects will be the same in requirements and test cases, and test steps and test sets. Similarly, the new layout where we have the different fields where they're grouped, that's going to be making its way into the different modules in the future. Also, the new graphing engine will be used throughout the application in the new version, and we'll be replacing all the old graphs with the new graphing engine. So if anything you've seen today you have feedback on, for example, you love it and you want to let us know to do more of it, feel free to let us know. If, on the other hand, so something here that you have some questions about or you'd like to see changes, please let us know before we roll it out to the next version, so that way we can adjust it ahead of time. For example, some users have already told us that this type drop-down is a bit hidden. They didn't realize you could change the type here. So in version 5.3, based on the feedback we've already received, we've actually added a more prominent box around it and drop-down like this, so it's clearer that this particular field is editable and is where you can change the type. So that is the end of our planned presentation for today. I'd now like to turn it over to Q&A. So if you have a question, you can write it through the chat window, or you can use the phone. And I'm going to unmute if you would like to unmute your line yourself and speak. If you need me to unmute the phone, please let me know also. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And happy to answer any questions you have. So we have a question coming in. Oh, and by the way, thanks, Letitia, for the nice feedback on the presentation. I appreciate it. The question was, is there a way to design a dashboard and then push it to all users so that everyone will see the page? The answer is there is not currently a way to do that. The first stage in that type of functionality was to create the predefined dashboards, developer, tester, and the general project manager view. We are looking to add more similar views to the project group dashboard and to the My Page, so we'll have more predefined views. There is not, as I said, yet a way for you to design the view. You can take one of our 3 predefined views and then customize it for yourself, but there isn't currently a way to do it for others. But we are considering that. Thanks to Anita for the nice feedback also. She said it was a really informative presentation. The next question from Letitia is, can we use custom fields to filter in the dashboards? The answer right now is no, you can't do that. You can't use a custom field to filter in the dashboards. But what we are looking to do is we are looking to do 2 things that I think will be very interesting. One thing is, if you're used to the reporting system, if you go into reporting and you go into there and you want to, let's say, generate a report, you as an administrator can create a new report, for example. And you can use the SQL language that comes with SpiraTest or SpiraTeam or SpiraPlan to make that change and create that report. What we're going to be doing is allowing you to take that same SQL. So let me just find an example of one. And let's say you wanted to generate a graph from this data. So we have a custom section here, and you can preview it, right? It looks like this, shows some data. But imagine that was a list of defects and a list of types and statuses, and you grouped it. You would love it to be able to generate a pie chart or a donut chart or a bar chart from that data or a line chart. What we'll be allowing you to do in the future is take a query that you've put in the system like that, and you'll be able to publish it as a widget that will then get added to the dashboard. So for example, going back to that My Page, you would be able to, as an administrator, create a widget, and then someone else can go into the add option right here, and they'll have that new widget available in the options. So in doing that, you could basically create a custom graph or table of results as a widget, and that could be filtered by custom field. So that's basically the planned option. And the idea is to have it be potentially graphs and potentially tables. In terms of being available in 5.3, it's a nice-to-have feature for 5.3. The core functionality in 5.3, for those who haven't looked at the roadmap, is exploratory testing, data-driven testing, data-driven test sets, the new detailed pages, and new graphing. Those will all definitely be in 5.3. We are hoping to include some of the new customizable widgets in 5.3. There is a possibility it could be in 5.4. And 5.3 will be delivered at the end of August. 5.4 will be in the autumn fall timeframe. So either 5.3 or 5.4. Hopefully 5.3, but maybe 5.4. Depends on the schedule. Any other questions from anyone? I'm just checking the chat window. Don't see any questions so far. Oh, something regarding requirements. The question from Letitia is something regarding requirements. It's difficult to sort them. Oh, correct. Yes, that's true. In the requirements module, you actually can't sort them at all. So because we allow you to position them, so for example, I can drag things like this. So because of that, there's no sorting. Whereas in the test case view, you can go into the test case and you can sort them because they're not positionable. So we're not going to be changing the requirements to be sortable versus positionable. That's true. But one of the things we are looking to do is potentially allow you to, as I create those widgets, where you could have a filtered custom widget or a custom report where you could sort it in SQL. So you could do it right now using SQL for a printable report, but you could do it as a widget if you wanted just the name and description, name and maybe the ID in a widget on the My Page. The other thing we are looking to do is generally allow you to have customizable widgets throughout the application, so you can use our REST API and JavaScript and actually create custom elements in the UI. So one thing you could do is create a sorted grid of requirements and put them into the user interface. That's available further down the road. The other thing we are thinking about is maybe allowing you to sort them so you still be able to have them available to be positioned by hand, but you could do a one-time sort. We're not sure about that. That could cause problems because then you lose the order they were in. So certainly the custom fields and the widgets and then the reporting is the nearest term solution for that. The question was, we have a problem with filtering. The filter on the name field is not searching packet, only in the features. So if you search on a requirement, the search currently only picks up the lowest level items, like new functionality. It doesn't pick up book management. That is correct. We have it as an open enhancement. I don't have a date for that right now, but we do have it tracked in the system as something that people have raised. So we are aware of it. We don't have anything planned at the exact time. So nothing planned for 5.3. Beyond that, it may be depending on feedback. And if you hear something today that interests you, that you think, oh, I really want that feature too, please let us know. Send it to the sales account. Write a comment on the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. If you're watching this after the fact, just add a comment. The more people who vote on something, the more likely it will be raised in our roadmap. Any other questions? Feel free to write it in the chat window, or you can unmute yourself and speak if you wish. Up to you. Okay, I'll one more minute. If we don't have any more questions, I'm going to end the meeting. Graphs in the left part of the page. Yes, there are plans to have more graphs in the left-hand side of the page. So, for example, if we go back to the incident tracking, we have this open issue incidents and then issues by priority. These are just some examples. The plans we have are to do two things. So let's say we're on requirements, to have something similar here in the requirements page. And then also maybe even having some miniature time graphs along the top. So things like burn down, burn up, discovery rates, close rates. We have those in the reporting section, but we might put smaller versions of those time graphs along the top. So you can see like the burn down and the maybe distribution, the number of the defect, the commit chart that we saw on the homepage. That could also go along the top as well. So we are looking to basically provide more graphs embedded throughout the application, not just in the dashboards and in the reporting section. But we will have also more graphs there too. Things like the ability to have not just the test run progress, but even the test case progress. Things like that we're hoping to have along the application. And as I said, we are using a new graphing framework. One feature we do have in the new version 5.3, it's already written, is you'll be able to export the entire dashboard as an image. So if you look at the dashboard, you have these two icons, which is modify settings and plus to add items. In the new version, we've got a third icon, which is called export to image, and the whole page will come as an image. Oh, and that also reminds me, we've also fixed some of the charts, if you remember, have a weird issue where if you go to, let me go to the general one, for example, the requirements burn down, if you were to export this as a PNG, it has a weird issue where it doesn't display the axes. We fixed that in the next version. So all the graphs will have axes and labels correctly. Oh, anyway. And basically, not only do we do that for this export, but we're now going to have an image export for the whole dashboard. So you could then take the whole screen, paste into a PowerPoint to give to maybe a manager or a boss. feedback is users like graphs. That's true. We all like graphs too. So definitely let us know if there's any graphs you like. We've had a lot of graphs over the years from customers in our internal SpiraTeam. We're going through them all, going to try and find the ones that we can create most easily. The new graphing framework we have, it makes it much, much easier for us to create graphs, and so we intend to do a lot more pervasive graphing and charting throughout the application. And they all use SVG, so they're very lightweight. They have tooltips, percentages, and much, much easier. And every existing graph has been rewritten from scratch as well. We've also added some more donut graphs and other shapes of graph, not just bar graphs, because we know some people like different visualizations. So, if there's no other questions, I'm going to end the meeting. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out today to attend the webinar. We will be doing additional webinars in the future on different topics. Our next set of webinars will be introductory ones for new users on SpiraTest, SpiraPlan, SpiraTeam, and Rapise, and Chronodesk. So if you've got any new users who are new to the system and you want to get them up to speed, feel free to put them in our additional beginner webinars. We'll also be doing additional webinars on different topics, for example, on DevOps, on different industries using SpiraTest in a regulated industry, in healthcare, in finance. And if you have specific topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know. And you can let us know in different ways. You can go to our blog and write comments on the blog. You can send an email to sales. You can contact us on our Twitter, Facebook, Zing, Instagram, or Pinterest channels, and as well, or Facebook. We have always different vehicles available. Please let us know. We definitely want to do different webinars, and so if there's a specific topic you feel like is underserved or something that's always confused you, that's really going to be helpful for us. One that I know we'd like to do for advanced users is also for the custom reporting. We've got lots of blogs written about it, which I'm sure you've seen, but we did find that when we did a webinar for one customer to help them out with it, they found it a lot more instructive to actually have a video about it as opposed to it being just in a blog that you read about. So we will do one, I think, on custom reporting in the near future as well. So I appreciate all the people joining us today. If anyone you know missed the webinar, we will also be posting it on YouTube, so you can download it and share it with anyone in your company at your leisure. So thanks very much. Have a great evening, great morning, wherever you are, and look forward to seeing you at a user summit or a webinar in the future. Thanks.